We're going to learn how to make some fantastic sourdough bread, from starting with making your own wild starter with your natural wild yeast around your home until we finish some fabulous bread that you and your friends and your family are going to really enjoy. It's going to be fun. I think you'll like it. Hello, this is Mike, and today we're going to learn about making a sourdough starter. We're going to understand what makes a good tasty sourdough and what doesn't, and what exactly it is. So to get started, we'll talk about the ingredients that we're going to use for this particular type of sourdough. First, I have, this is dark pumpernickel rye flour. I've got 2 cups here. And I also have regular white flour. This is bread flour. Those are easy. The next thing I have is milk, and this is 2 cups, so I suppose I should give the ingredients. 2 cups of rye flour, 2 cups of milk, this is, I just used 2% milk, 1 cup of white flour. We're going to use 2 teaspoons of vinegar. Now this is not regular vinegar, this is vinegar with mother. And if you can see closely, this has mother in it. You can see that kind of gooey stuff on the top. It's very important. If your vinegar does not have mother, then you can leave it out. Then we have sugar. You can either use white sugar, which is not very interesting, but it does the trick. You can use brown sugar. I would recommend not using molasses, because sometimes molasses is sulfonated, and that sulfonate will reduce the activity of the yeast growth. You can use honey if you prefer, or my very most favorite, this is real pure maple syrup. This is actually from Wisconsin, but it's from a company called Little Man Syrup in northern Wisconsin. They make a very pure and very wonderful maple syrup. So let's talk about why we're going to use each of these ingredients. Sourdough, when we talk about sourdough, people typically talk about using wild yeast to start the fermentation process to make the bread lighter and bubbly. But the taste of sourdough, typically when you talk about sourdough, doesn't really come from wild yeast. Typically, it comes from 2 different types of things. Sour means acid, so you have to have some kind of acid for the sour taste, and there's 2 typical ways of making that happen. One is with milk. Instead of using water, you would use milk, and as this milk sours, it is going to there's a lactose bacilli in here that turns the milk into lactic acid, or it doesn't turn all the milk, but it converts some of the lactose that's in the milk converts it into lactic acid. A lot like the sourness that you taste in yogurt. And people might say, well, then why can't I just use yogurt? You can just use yogurt. So another thing that will make the sourdough sour is acetic acid, which is essentially vinegar. And when we add sugars to our starter, the natural yeast that we're going to harvest from the atmosphere or that's naturally found in the flours is going to convert the sugars, whether it's the sucrose from sugar, or whether it is honey, or whether it is maple syrup, or whether it is maltose, which is found in the flours. It will convert those sugars into alcohol. So when yeast consumes sugars, it produces 2 things. One is carbon dioxide, which makes the bread blow up, and the other is it produces alcohol. And alcohol, of course, isn't sour, but when we have mother, when we add that in, the mother will convert that alcohol into acetic acid, which essentially is vinegar. There's two ways to get mother. One is to let fruit flies fly into your mixture, and they carry that bacteria on their legs, and then that gets down into your starter. Or the other one, which seems so much more sophisticated, is to use mother, but it actually all comes from the same place. So when we're going to mix these together, and that's going to be 2 cups of milk, 2 cups of rye flour, 1 cup of white flour, and then about a tablespoon or 2, depends on you, of whatever type of sugar you want. And then in order to make things go faster is about 2 teaspoons of vinegar with mother. You can buy that in the store. They sell it as apple cider vinegar. And we're going to mix these, and then we're going to set that aside for about 2 weeks or so. Now, I'm going to skip that whole mixing step because it's easy. Just take a pail, you mix them together and put a cloth over the top and put it in a warm space. And give it about 2 weeks, and you'll start to smell it. And you'll smell it starting to get sour. Now, let's have a look here and see if you can see this. You can see the bubbles. Can you see that? You can see the bubbles, and you can see how light and lively it is. That is our sourdough starter. As I mentioned, the sourness comes from either lactic acid or acetic acid. But if that was all there was to it, you could just add vinegar to your normal dough and you'd have sour bread. Could you do that? Sure, you could do that. Could you just use yogurt and have a more mild sour taste to your bread? Yeah, you could sure do that. But there's something else, and that something else is called esters. And when the alcohol when the yeast converts the sugars to alcohol and carbon dioxide, they also produce esters. And esters are these odd flavors, sometimes good, sometimes bad. And some places have excellent tasting esters. And one, of course, that's so famous is San Francisco. San Francisco sourdough is so famous. In other places, the natural yeast produces esters that are no good. They may taste funky or earthy or moldy. And that, of course, is unfortunate. So if you're lucky enough to live in an area that has good tasting yeast, wild yeast, you can make some excellent tasting sourdough bread. But remember that really the yeast produces 2 things, and that is carbon dioxide and alcohol. And that alcohol may convert to acid if you allow it to. But otherwise, if you don't give it the chance to produce the sourness, you're not going to have sourdough bread. You'll have naturally harvested yeast bread, which is okay, and it's interesting, but it doesn't have that sourdough sourness that we think of as sourdough bread. So in order to make a sourdough bread that has a sour taste to it, then you're going to want to give it a little bit of a help by using milk instead of water, and giving it some sugar that can convert into acetic acid or vinegar. Those will give your bread a beautiful taste. Now, if you want to keep it alive, about once every 7 to 10 days, you're going to feed this yeast. So put in another cup of water and another cup of flour, of rye flour, and a pinch or 2 of white flour and some sugar. Stir it up, and that's going to refeed that starter, and then it's going to get better and better and better, and it'll get more and more sour. And you can keep that going for, even as much as, a month or longer, in fact. So what you want to do then, when you make your bread, you can rely 100% on the wild yeast, but your bread will not really get the fluffiness that people are used to. And you can make interesting breads, but if nobody wants to eat them, what's the fun in that? So what I recommend is take your starter, mix it up with your bread. Doesn't matter how much you use, it depends on what type of taste. I might use this whole starter, which this is about 4 quarts of starter. No, sorry. This is 1 quart of starter, about 2 quarts of starter. This is about 2 quarts of starter. Sorry. 2 quarts of starter. Mix that up with your bread and have a very robust and very sour taste. If you use less, it's going to have less of a sour taste. However, I also recommend that you use regular yeast, bread yeast, to enhance the CO2 and the fluffiness of your loaf, if you want people to eat it. Otherwise, you may be eating it alone. So, give that a try. Like I say, just mix it up, put a cover on it, and this is a living organism. So, you've got to keep it fed, you've got to keep it warm, and it will keep producing excellent starter for you for a long time. All right, let's have a look at our sourdough. Now this sourdough was started about a month ago, and I've been feeding it. We actually used it to make some bread, and that bread was mildly sour, not as sour as you might hope for sourdough bread. So this is our starter. When I made the bread with this the first time after it was about 2 weeks old, it was okay, and it had some flavors to it. But then I kept a bit of the starter and then added more milk, more rye flour, more regular flour, a bit of honey, a bit of maple syrup, and stirred that up and let it sit. Now this has a very decidedly acidic bouquet. So I'll let you have a look at this and see. In fact, I'll put it down, re-angle the lens. So this is what the sourdough starter looks like. It's liquidy. Now, unfortunately, I stirred it, so it would normally be bubbly and be very active. And I've been feeding this about once a week. I put in about 1.5 cups of milk, 1/2 cup of water, about 1 cup of rye flour, 1/2 cup of white flour, and about, I'd say maybe 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, or honey, or you can even use any kind of sugar, really white sugar or brown sugar if you like as well. But this has a very pronounced sour smell, which is a great smell, delicious. And then when I make my sourdough bread, I'm going to use most of this as my liquid for my bread dough. Because I like very sour bread. I like my sourdough to have a really sour and pronounced flavor, a lot of bouquet, and I like a lot of those esters that come from the wild yeast. So that's what I do. Some of the ingredients or instructions that you get for making sourdough will suggest that you just use a bit of the sourdough starter, but I think, in my opinion, that if you want to have it sour, use a lot of sourdough starter as your liquid, a little bit extra milk, a little bit extra water, and in that way you're going to get really that sourdough taste that we talk about, or boom, if a little bit's good, a lot is a lot better, right? So, and if your tastes are more refined, well, then that probably won't suit you. But if you're getting into the excitement of sourdough, well, sourdough. Mike again, and now I'm with my friend Kevin. Kevin and I have been baking bread together for a long time. How long is maybe 20 years? 15 years? Something like that. When I think since you were about 9 years old, something like that. And we used to bake a lot of bread for our church. And probably in total we've baked over probably 1,000 loaves if we total them all up. So what we're going to do though is we're going to take the sourdough sponge that we talked about previously, and we're going to convert it now to bread. So this sponge, or sourdough starter, you can see the bubbles all the bubbles in there. And what we're going to do though is we're going to add some bread yeast because if we just use this for baking bread, natural sourdough yeast, it's okay. But mainly I think it's good for taste. If we try to rely on this to make the bread, it would first of all take an enormous amount of time and it wouldn't get that fluffy. So we're going to mainly use the sourdough for the taste, but we're going to it up a little bit with regular yeast. So what we're going to do, I'll add, and then Kevin is going to mix. Kevin is your bread hook. And we have here, I guess it looks like about, what do you say, about a half a gallon of starter? Is that what that looks like? About a half a gallon of starter. And this starter is actually pretty young. It's only been going for just over a week. So I'm going to go ahead and add 1, 2, I'm going to put in 3 tablespoons of regular yeast. Go ahead, Kevin, you can start mixing that up.
You got it.
All right. Now I'm also going to add some milk. Now I've got some milk here. And you don't get too worried about the exact proportions of how things are, because you make your bread so that the dough ball is the right consistency. This is rye flour. And do you feel like a lot of rye today, or do you feel like a little bit of rye?
I'm feeling like a lot of rye.
You're feeling like a lot of rye, so then here we go. A lot of rye, make it a little bit heavy. So if you're going to add a lot of adjunct flours, again like rye or whole wheat or bran, then you have to add more yeast. Now, well, the reason is those heavy adjuncts don't have gluten in them, and they'll tend to make your bread very heavy and wet. And so we're going to add some sugar. Now, we could have just dumped all of our flour into that starter, but the starter, even though it's alive, it needs to be kicked up a little bit. It needs to be brought more alive. If we just put flour in, it'll be real slow and slow to go. So we're adding some liquids, and we're adding some additional sugars. Now, as I mentioned before, there's no sugar that adds more spunk to the bread than real maple syrup. Not the junk that you get that's made with corn syrup. This is 100% pure maple syrup. This is made by Little Man Syrup in Wisconsin. And you don't need a lot. And of course, we all know maple syrup it's expensive. It ain't cheap. So we added some milk. We're going to add a little bit of beer. Why? Because we have it. And it makes good taste. So I know that Kevin he's a bread making machine, so even if we make a lot of bread, it's not a problem. How's that looking?
Looks great, Mike.
Good. All right, the next thing we're going to add is we're going to add some salt. If you don't put salt in, then your bread will not have taste. So, or, won't have a taste that people like anyway. So we're going to put some salt in. The general rule is that it's 1 teaspoon of salt for every cup of liquid. 1 tablespoon, which is what this is, equals how many teaspoons?
3 teaspoons.
Indeed, 3 teaspoons. So that's 3. I'm guessing we have at least 6 cups of liquid in there.
Right, good guess.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be exact. A little bit more, a little bit less. Now, too much salt, of course, is no good. And we're going to add some oil. And this is generally speaking 3 tablespoons of oil per every 2 cups of water. Oh, see, I'm not worried about that. You don't have to get too worked up about it. This is bread making is a creative art. You can use any kind of oil that you want. That happens to be olive oil. I think another excellent oil is sesame oil, which adds a delicious taste. It's a little bit on the spendy side, but you can use any kind of vegetable, soy oil, corn oil, peanut oil. Ready?
I'm ready.
There we go. That was white flour. We're going to use a lot more white flour than we just put in just now. So we have to use white flour for the glutens that it adds. And You know what, Kevin?
What's that?
When I look at that volume, I'm thinking we don't have enough yeast in. I'm going to add some more yeast. Oh, geez, look at that. The double pouring there. How's it looking?
Well, it's coming together.
Now there's some yeast spilled on the table. I'm not going to worry about that because it will become incorporated in what we do. So a lot of bakers will tell you that you have to hydrate your yeast, that you have to put water in the yeast and then put water or put your yeast in water and let it absorb and hydrate. You know, it's not that big of a deal. In fact, there's some recipes that will tell you to take dried yeast and mix it with your flour and then put that with your liquids. Ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take some flour. You guys, he's over here drinking water.
Okay. Well, he went poop pee-pee outside, so he was a good boy. Come here. Let me go in that room.
A new puppy on the run. Okay, ready? We'll take this and pour this out.
Okay. You can stay here.
There you go. We're going to have to get cracking. Look at that.
Almost got it.
This is going to be enough for about 6 loaves of bread, I think.
Excellent.
Okay, there we go.
How's that?
All right, so let's, we better start mixing.
Absolutely.
There it is. Ready to go? Kevin, you might want to put some flour in your hands so you
Good
can.
thinking.
No.
Very good.
I forgot to put the secret ingredient in here, and that secret ingredient is potato starch. So we're going to put some of that in. You keep moving.
You got it.
How much potato starch? I'm going to put in about 1/3 of a cup. Potato starch simply means instant potatoes in our case.
Sure.
You could hydrate it first. Again, it's not a big deal. All right, looking good, Kev. All right, time for you to start digging your hands in.
Yeah. That's my favorite part right here, actually.
That's what most people like making bread. Just like Play-Doh time.
Yeah.
All right. You can see the way that Kevin is making his. You see he's tearing his dough and exposing the wet parts of the dough to the flour, rather than just simply pushing the dough into the flour. You know, feels pretty good. We decide you want to put more rye in there, we can. Okay. All right.
It's coming together.
How's it smell? Okay, would you smell anything in particular?
I smell the beer.
Smell the beer?
Just out of
All
college.
right, good.
I smell the rye. I smell the potato starch.
Yeah, a little bit
I
more
just-
rye in there. All right, so a little bit more flour in for us, I think.
Absolutely. Still a little wet.
All right. There we go. All right, here we go. Ready?
Go for it. You're half and half?
Yeah, that's what we do. So this is how you make bread when you're going as a team. We'll take our bread, we'll knead it, and then we'll cut it in half and switch those halves and mix them. Kevin has gigantic hands, so
Yep.
he makes fast work of this stuff.
We'll pay attention to his technique and not mine.
Yeah, here we go. Ready?
That's for fun.
All right, there you go.
Well, thank you.
Mhm.
I like to take mine in the air. I don't know, just I've been doing that.
And everybody's got their own
Here.
special thing, yeah. And we never like to waste any flour.
Nope.
So we're gonna try to get our moisture right and add the flour as we need it. But I don't like leaving any flour on the table. Okay, ready? Here we go.
I'm ready.
So Kevin, it's been probably 7 years or so since we made bread last.
Probably.
You went up to college and now you're back, but you told me that one of the things you like to do even when you're in college was what?
Well, I love baking bread.
Making bread.
It's fun to study and let it rise and come back.
Is that right?
Yeah. You know, because it's an all-day sort of a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It leaves room to take breaks and carry on with your life.
That's neat. So even though you were in college studying, you still found time for making bread.
Absolutely.
Did you find it was therapeutic?
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it help you meet girls?
You would be surprised, actually. It did.
Is that right? There you go.
It's kind of a rare talent, you know. There's not many guys that sit to do this.
Oh, is that right? Oh.
It's too bad because it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. It's funny how guys can go from playing with Play-Doh when they're 5 and 6, and then suddenly they don't want to.
Yeah.
They don't even discover the joys of making bread. Edible Play-Doh.
It is bad.
When I was a kid, well, when I was about 14 or 15, my brother and I made pizza crust for a job after school and on the weekends. And, well, sometimes out of boredom, we would take that pizza dough and shape it in the form of a human being on the table, laying like this.
Wow.
And whoever made the bread man would hide a knife or a spoon somewhere in the body, and then and then we had to go. The other guy would try to find the knife or the spoon with making as few cuts as possible. I think we were inspired by the Dr. Phibes movie of 1970 something.
It kind of sounds like the Operation game a little bit.
Something like that.
Did you put that whole thing in the oven?
There you go.
Or?
No, and then we would disassemble it and turn it into pizza crust.
Okay.
Okay, this is starting to feel like stiff dough. How's yours?
Mine's feel about the
Is
same.
it really? Okay, we'll see if we can use up this flour. We might have to put a splash of the liquid on. This one feels like it might need.
Let's see.
How about yours?
It's a little sticky yet. So
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some parts.
Okay. We might be able to use up all this then. Especially if we tear it here.
This is really good workout for your forearms. And
It certainly is. Yeah, look at this. Burn, 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 burn.
I'm not quite there yet.
You might think I'm a butcher. I'm just a baker.
Just a baker.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Thank you.
Here we go. Here we go. How's yours feeling?
It feels pretty done.
Pretty good?
Based on that method you told me to check, right?
Yeah.
It feels like something.
Feels like a baby's body.
Baby's bottom.
Yep. Now, Kevin's doesn't have any babies yet, but he's got siblings, little brothers and sisters,
That's
and I'm
right.
sure that when you were growing up,
Oh yeah.
mm-hmm,
You gotta help with that.
yeah. Change that kid's diaper. Oh my jeez. Are you ready?
Yep.
Can you smell any of the sour in here, Kevin?
You know, actually I do.
You smell a little bit?
Yeah.
You know, if it was older starter, then it would have a much more sour smell. Yeah, good. I think we're getting there. So, and perfectly cleaning up the table. Now, you of course want to wash your hands before you do your baking, so
Absolutely.
that You don't want to start out with dirty hands.
Because
in the
it's all
beginning.
in there.
And then, yeah, and then have them clean at the end. You know, that's the beauty of making your own bread. I tell you, you go to some of these bakery places and you don't know what's going on in the kitchens. Okay. All right, it feels about right.
Yeah.
It might be just ever so slightly wet.
That
What
was
do you
great.
think?
That was excellent.
Is it? All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some of our, and take a bit of this, and we're going to put this back into our bucket, and we're going to add more milk and more flour, and we're going to keep our starter going then, that way. All right, so there we have it. We'll turn this into a nice dough ball.
Beautiful.
Then we will put it inside of a plastic bag. And we will now have some tea or coffee, which you choose.
Tea sounds nice.
So we shall.
This is just a little samba built upon a single note. Other notes are bound to fall.
Well, all right then. So we're going to now, we've let the bread rise. We're going to punch it down. We want to do this actually 4 times. So Kevin, hey man, what the heck?
Wow. Something's happening today. I'm going to wash my hands real quick.
All right. While he's washing his hands, I'll show you what we're doing. So we're just going to take you can see how much it's raised since we were looking at it last time. We're just going to take it and punch it down. We don't have to go crazy. Just taking the outsides and pushing and bringing them in. And we're going to do this 4 times. And each time that we do this, it's going to get more elastic and more palatable. So here's what she looks like now. And if you can look at the surface, you can see that it's going to get smoother and smoother as we go along. All right, so this is going to be the second time we punch it down. It's actually only been about 10 or 15 minutes since we, it's only been about 10 or 15 minutes since we did the first punch down. So, Kev, you want to do this one?
Yeah, sure. I've got the wet hands.
This is the fun part of it. There you go. And the more we work it like this, it unfolds the proteins, the gluten proteins, and as they unfold and get longer and longer, the bread gets more and more stretchy and more pliable. If you have bread that hasn't been proofed good enough or it hasn't been worked like this, it tends to be crumbly and doesn't have that real nice chewy texture. So it's nice to work these proteins and unfold them and get them nice and chewy. That's the kind of bread that I like. How about you?
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's not too much unlike, a chemical leavened bread, really. So, all right, getting nice texture. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay, we can see it's getting smoother and smoother every time we do this. A little and more elastic as well. Look at that, almost like glue. And we destroyed our plastic bag, so we have to get another one. Thankfully, there's an unlimited supply of these. All right, there you have it. So here we go. This is going to be our third time here, punching the dough down. You want to do it, Kat?
I'll give it a try, Hank.
Now a lot of bakers don't feel you need to punch the dough down and work it this much. But really the more that you work it physically, mechanically, then the more elastic the dough becomes. It does stretch out from the CO2 that's building in pressure, tearing the bread apart, expanding it. But this also helps too, this mechanical working of it. Now some bakers will actually pound their bread. They'll take it and they'll throw it like this onto the table to try to stretch out those. And others may take a rolling pin and beat the bread into submission. If that makes you feel better about your day, absolutely do that. So here we have it. This is our third. We're going to punch this down one more time in about 10 or 15 more minutes. And then we're going to form it into loaves, and that's going to be another thing. So here you can see this is it after the third. Very, very elastic, nice surface. Beautiful. It's beautiful, really. So I'm going to go ahead and form this into a nice dough ball. And 15 minutes later, or be a lap. Our third punch down of the dough. Here you go, Kevin.
Okay.
After this, we're going to divide it up into loaves, and then we're going to find different ways to prepare it for baking. Some that are kind of artistic and beautiful, and others that are just functional. So I think what we'll do, Kevin, is we'll make 1.5 pound loaves. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right.
I think I beat it up enough. You want to whack at it?
Fairly abused.
All right.
All right. I remember you're excellent at doing the weight thing. You want to try to guess?
I can try.
1.5 pounds?
Okay. Well, let's see. This is heavier dough, so let's see what happens. I don't know. That might be a little too small. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, what do you think?
Well, that's 15 ounces, so here's what I think. I think probably that's 2.
That's two.
You know what? I'll tell you what. They're going to be in these baskets, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that's still not quite enough. I'm going to make it a 2.5 pound loaf. How does that sound? And there it is. Can't wait. Pretty close. Good enough. There you go. And then we get this, and we just got to figure out what to do with this. Anything special you want?
How big are your bread pans?
We got everything. You can do a baguette if you want. So maybe we'll do it with that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our loaves and we're going to roll them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to roll them out like this. When you do this, especially if you use high gluten flour, the bread will want to pull in. It's very elastic. It has a lot of memory. It'll pull back on you. So when that happens, just let it relax for a couple of seconds. So you give it a roll and it tends to fight you, relax. Give it a chance to relax. And then it'll cooperate with you in your next roll. Couple seconds. Roll. Roll. Yeah. So here we go. So that roll is going to do a couple of things for this loaf. It's going to put some oxygen back into the yeast so it can have its next chance to rise, and the final rise. And we want to make sure that there's no seams on the sides, because those seams will open up on us. Okay, so you can see here, nice on the surface. Underneath, ever so slightly, maybe we can see some seams. Just going to quick pinch those, and then we're going to let them sit like this on the side. On the side that we normally have the seam, we'll put that down, and that'll help that seam close up. So get them rolling here, and then I'll take my rolling pin and roll it out. By turning it over, gives it a chance to relax. That memory, so gluten against muscle. Only one gets to win. Okay. All right. Do you remember how to dust the baskets? With
It's been a while.
starch? Okay, so this is starch. You can use cornstarch, potato starch. This happens to be rice starch. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our baskets and we're going to very lightly dust the baskets with the starch. We use starch because the starch won't blacken, won't burn or toast, and it will remain a very white color, and then the bread underneath is going to toast as it bakes. The crumb or the crust on the outside will darken, and then we'll have these beautiful patterns. Now you can see this is actually a French bowl made specifically for this, a French basket. This is one we just got at the local church sale for 50 cents, and they both work well. So we're going to take the finest sieve that we have, the tightest weave, and then behind you, Kevin, if you just grab a spoon. This happens to be rice starch from Japan. But you can use cornstarch, it all works about the same. So I'm going to take this, and you can see that I have the starch here. And then I'm going to hold it up high and very lightly tap. And then that coats the inside of the basket. Coats the inside of the basket with the starch powder. Take your dough ball, we press it right down into the basket, pushing it in like this so that as much of that starch pattern as possible ends up on our dough ball. Take this, same thing. let that rest for a few minutes, and then the seam underneath should disappear. Right now there's not much of a seam if you do it correctly. So here was the top and that was the underneath. So let that sit. And then we let the bread rise to about twice its size, the bread dough, and then we'll bake it. So we're going to preheat the oven to 350, let it raise, and in about maybe 20 or 30 minutes she'll be ready to go. We're ready to bake. So we have these thin baguettes that we made with our leftover flour, or leftover dough I should say. The way it comes out. It looks pretty nice. You can see that. Baguette's ready to go. And then the next thing is our piece de resistance. We got the bread that we made in our baskets. And when we turn these, look that up. Good. You can see the pattern that we have on this. Now I'm going to put this on a baking sheet, and some baskets work better than others. And of course those baskets that are made specifically for this purpose do the best. Yeah, so, and I think you can see here, it's a beautiful pattern. The French know what they're doing when it comes to making bread, we have to admit it. Now we have to slash the bread. We have to slash the dough before we bake it, or else there's going to be bubbles in the bread and underneath the crust, and sometimes the crust will split in terrible ways. You can slash any pattern that you want. I like to go around the outside of the loaf like this, and when I do that, then the whole loaf is going to raise straight up like a muffin without the top cracking. And then I can preserve, by doing that, I can preserve that beautiful pattern that we went through the trouble of creating. Now some folks actually they cut you know, a cross or whatever into the dough, and that looks nice too. You can do whatever you want. So we've got this, that'll be raised and put it in the oven. This, well, I wonder if we can put crosses on there. We'll give it a try. Here, here, down here. Ooh, jeez, not cooperating with it, is it? So you can slash it any way that you want, as long as you slash it. All right, and into the oven now we go. So first we're going to put these onto the plates. We're baking them on ceramic plates. I also have a baking stone. You have to heat the stones up or the plates up in advance. And then this on top. And we're going to time it. We're going to bake those baguettes for, I'm going to say we're going to check them in 20 minutes. Those 2.5 pound loaves, I think, should bake for about 55 minutes. So when we check these, we've got to keep track of our time and check it in about 20 minutes. The baguettes are done. They look perfect. 30 minutes in the oven. Here we have it. You have to let bread cool off. Everybody loves hot bread. I think there's a misconception that you can just take it right out of the oven and start eating it. But bread is something like lava. It's always a little bit better when it gets to firm up. Otherwise, if you tear open fresh bread, really a lot of times the bread is kind of gooey. So you give it a couple of, even if it's only 5 or 10 minutes, just enough time for that bread to firm up and settle. Because the bread's not really done when you take it right out of the oven. It has to go through another process. We've got still our 2 other loaves that are in the oven right now that are baking. They've got to go for another 35 minutes. Well, all right, let's try some of our bread. Actually, you'll notice one is missing. Oh, where did it go? So, in the midst of the magic of video, Kevin, please try it. We're gonna try it with liquid cheese. This is one of my favorites again. This is old-fashioned brand aged cheddar cheese sauce. It's a dipping sauce that you might use with chips or on vegetables, that kind of thing. Well, delicious. Go ahead, my friend. Your turn. Crack one open.
All right.
That's what you call breaking bread.
Yes.
Try some here as well.
That is really good.
Is it really? Oh, oh, that's delicious.
Very good flavor.
Okay, so now we got more bread we gotta take out of the oven. So, ready? Bombs away. Now, where's my?
Just oven this. There they are.
This will work.
Okay.
All right.
That one looks really good.
So, here's one loaf. You can see that turned out very well. You can see that I split it on the side and.
You all right there?
Make some space for the other one.
There you go. Here, spider web.
And then here's the other one. You can see so pattern very nice.
Gorgeous.
And this one here. Beautiful. So we took some of the bread dough, we put it in here, mixed it with 2 cups of milk and 2 cups of rye and 2 cups of white flour, a teaspoon of vinegar that has mother in it, and about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. Anything else I'm missing?
You get the salt in there?
No salt yet. And so then we're going to put this to the side and let it ferment for about 2 weeks, and I'll feed it along the way and keep it going, and then it'll turn into some good sourdough starter again. And that's it. Thanks, Kev.
Pleasure working with you.
Yeah, another great day of baking.
I learned a lot.